Good afternoon. Welcome to the Confident Career Show. My name is Femi. I'm here with my co-founder, Joe, and we've got an amazing guest. We've got Janet Davidson in the room, and this is the Confident Career Show. So I'm going to, before I invite Janet to introduce herself and to get involved in the questions, just to let our audience know, this is all about inspiring people with their careers. It's all about confident careers. We know the challenges out there that people are facing with finding their first job, students coming out of university, graduating, just even professional people looking for their next job. And we know how tough it is. So this is all about trying to inspire confidence. You've been out of university for a while, you're looking for your next gig, perhaps. This is all about trying to inspire, trying to give people hope. And we know it's a very tough time. It's tough times for people in terms of trying to find their next job, exploring their ideas in terms of careers and so on. I also want to give a big shout out to my good friend here, my co-founder Joe, who's helping out with behind the scenes. We wouldn't be able to get all this done without him, and also Des, who's far away. So I just want to give a big shout out to those people. So thank you so much, Janet. I'm just going to bring you back into the picture. So Janet is someone I've known for many, many years. We worked before. You actually employed me for a little while at college. And so Janet is a businesswoman, and she's a senior leader within education. She's an education consultant. And so Janet, I just want to get you to explore or expand a little bit more on that. What is it you do, and how do you help, young people or people looking for work?
Okay. I'm currently in a senior role in education. I work with young people and adults, and in my capacity, I'm there to try and help to elevate young people to become the future leaders for our country or worldwide. So my role now is to engage with people so that I can help to equip them with the right skills, tools, and experiences for the world of work. And I think based on my own experiences over time since I started my career and the sort of direction of travel, I've managed to get to the point where I now feel I can give back to the community or even to the wider space. So in my capacity, I've been involved in lots of different elements of work, whether it's business, entrepreneurship, governance, working with schools, working with colleges, working with the community, just to try and engage and give back as much as I can from what I've gained over my time in my career. And I hope with the extensive amount of experiences that I have, I'm able to help others to achieve their goals as well.
Fantastic. I think you're being very humble there, Janet. I know, like I said, I've known you for more than a decade, and you've given back, and you're continuously giving back. I was speaking to you earlier before we came on the podcast about where do you find the time. It's incredible, and we need more people like you, and we're grateful. We're thankful that you could come to the Confident Career Show and share some of your wisdom and knowledge. So the first question I want to ask is, you might have heard, I'm sure you would have come across this review that came out. I think it was actually released in May. So this is the Milburn Review. So it's a landmark report that the government commissioned, the DWP, Department for Work and Pension. So it was all about trying to understand what is happening with our young people and students, I guess. And so, because one of the things, as you know, you work in obviously FE, HE as well. The university I work at, sometimes you don't think maybe they are represented in those figures, but they are, because one of the things I found was there's about, I think it's 13 to 15% of graduates are represented in those NEET figures. So according to that review by Milburn, he talks about over 1 million young people are NEET. So NEET, for those who may not know, stands for Not in Education, Employment or Training. So that means we have over 1 million. That is a ticking time bomb as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and the scary thing is, it talks about is if this is not taken urgently and urgent action is not addressed or taken, this number could actually rise to 1.25. So it would rise by 25% in the next 5 years if this is not taken urgently. So my question is, how do we start to address this problem? Because, and also I'm going to give you time to answer this question. There was another report that came out not long ago. This one came out in June. This is quite a more recent report by Education and Employers. And it talked about actually the solutions that we need. We already know. Part of it is work experience. Work experience, when you give young people work experience from a young age, because actually what they said is the more employer engagement those under 16 have, prior to them, the more employer engagement they have, prior to them getting to that 16 to 18-year group, I think there's 80% less chance of them becoming NEET. I probably didn't say that as well, but I think you get where I'm trying to get.
Yeah, I do.
So basically, the more work experience you have, the less chance of becoming NEET. But then that same report talked about how most of the people that got work experience, it was mostly through their contacts. That's what most of the families were saying, most of the school teachers were saying, that most of the people that get those work experience opportunities is through their network, their contacts. So that means a lot of people are being, disadvantaged.
Yeah.
So how do we start to address this? What are you seeing in the sort of marketplace? Or what do you suggest in terms of actually trying to address this
Well,
challenge?
I think from the first point you raised around the fact of preparing young people for the eventual career pathway or world of work and working, as you said, in terms of with employers, I think it should start as well as the fact when they're starting in primary school and the curriculum and helping them to prepare for the future. It may be that you give them snippets of things to do, but then as they gradually get into secondary, the plan is really also for teachers and those who are teaching our young people to have the right skills and knowledge as well to teach them about careers and the world of work. And then those young people are then being prepared for when they get into, for example, year 10, year 11, before they go into, say, further education or a traineeship or an apprenticeship. I think at that point we've got to ensure that we've got the right mechanisms, strategies in place to equip our young people. I mean, where I am at the moment, I work with young people 16 to 18, and I know when they've left school, it depends on how much engagement they've had, for example, with careers, how much they've done their work experience, and whether there's anyone really encouraging them to get the right skills to go into the next step of their sort of future pathway. So they either will look at thinking, do I want to go to college? Do I stay on at sixth form? Or the options are there. But I think at that point, it's also about all those networks around that young person to help them to get to know, I need to either find myself a career, I need to do something positive to get myself to that point. It's about motivation. But when it comes to the fact with NEETs, I know in my past experiences, I've worked with so many young people who then want to transition, for example, from school to college, that they may not have the right knowledge, experience or guidance. And some of them may think that they're having a free period, that they then go off and decide not to go into education or training, and they end up going somewhere else. And then those are the ones who are kind of like lost in a sense, because we need to go out and find them and bring them back. So the NEET figures will start to increase from when they start to leave school, for example. So when we get them into, say, further education, then we're working with them to engage them, these young people at 16 to 18. Then it's about bringing the employers on board. And once the employers are coming on board, it's about how we engage the employers to give the learners or the young people opportunities to get skills for work. So I think in my own experiences, I've worked with so many different employers to try and help to get learners to get work experience, work shadowing, volunteering, doing projects and challenges and engaging the employers so you can get a bit of a partnership going. So I think there's different strategies, different ways we should be working from when they're young, primary, secondary, and then when they get into adult education environments, and then eventually on to HE if they're going to go and want to do a degree, again working with employers. But the NEET category, we need to address that earlier on.
Yeah, and I think it's nice where you rounded that off, because what you just said there about we need to start addressing this problem earlier on, and you started by looking at primary, and early on in secondary school, or maybe key stage 3 as they call it. And actually, one of the things, I think there's a mandatory requirement now from the government that I think young people now from ages, I think maybe from 11 to 14, they have to have X amount of hours. I don't know if it's 10 hours or 14 hours of work experience and engagement with an employer. Because it's now clear from reports now that the more employer engagement a young person has prior to them turning 16, the less the chance of them becoming NEET when they get to between 16 and 18.
Yeah.
80% less chance of that happening, apparently. So that so it goes back to that point about the sooner you start, the better. But there's a lot of what you said there talked about the challenges around, obviously you talked about partnerships as well, in terms of bringing employers on board. And before I explore that, I just wanted to maybe just ask you this, and we've got maybe a couple of more questions just to ask you. But what opportunities do you see for young people at the moment?
Well, I'm thinking firstly, I recently had some students from school who were doing work experience. And as you mentioned earlier, it was through their parents who worked at where I work who have asked for those young people to come in to get some experience in the college where I work, which was good because then when these young people have come in, you can give them projects and things to do. And you look and see and say to them, what do you need to learn in order to help you to develop certain skills? And they tell you. And as part of what I've done, I've tried to make sure I provide those types of activities so that then when they go away, they feel confident and they're happy. And I think in general, working with in the sector of education and just making sure, the government, for example, I mean, in terms of young people 16 to 18, we found that they will then need to get the sort of starting point to get their skills developed through different networks. So the networks that we would have is building up partnerships with different people who can actually offer certain experiences, like if it's an internship, if it's a paid volunteering experience or non-volunteering experience where they don't get paid, but it's also giving them the opportunity to go into the workplace, go do some work shadowing, maybe find out a bit more about what employers do, what the employers are looking for. The government also have had to provide some strategies now to engage with, say, colleges and even schools to ensure they've got a good curriculum offer so that young people can get the right skills to develop to work with employers. So there's a number of things that we can do to equip, and bringing employers as visitors into the establishment is quite good to do as well.
I'm going to ask you a question. It's kind of like a business question, really, and this is like the penultimate question, Janet. In terms of, and I saw this somewhere. I always like trying to nick ideas from different places, you know, and it was talking about how the problem may not necessarily be always a demand problem or demand issue, so to speak, not necessarily a problem, but an issue. Because often we think, oh, the issues or the challenges are with employers. Employers are always talking about lack of skills. They can't get the talent with the right skills. But and there's obviously more macroeconomic issues as well that is outside of our control. You know what's happening, just generally speaking. I think personally, I think there's three biggest issues right now affecting us in the UK and probably around the world. Is the geopolitical tensions, obviously cost of living crisis, and the NEET issue. I think these for me are the biggest issues right now. I'm sure there are other factors or other issues, but so is it? So the question is it a demand issue or is it more of a supply issue? And when I say supply issue, is it, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about in terms of provision within the schools and colleges and universities, in terms of support, and our previous guest did talk about this a little bit, in terms of what do you see, where do you see the issues? Is it so complex that they're kind of like interconnected, or is it one side or the other?
I think it's interconnected, but it depends on how you look at it. Because if I think to where I am in education, for example, I know that local government and national government have got policies now that they have to implement across the sector in education, for example, where local partnerships are developed around the labour market. So whatever jobs now are being created in the labour market, it's about the local and regional government trying to establish the fact this is what's required for jobs and careers in the future. So we need all these people who are stakeholders like colleges and schools to now start to build up works or practices, like, for example, in FE, further education, they do curriculum development and design, where they design the curriculum based on the labour market needs. And then they can tailor their courses to meet needs of those industries. So, for example, at the moment, there's the digital environment, you've got a lot of AI and stuff, health sector, etc. So it's where those growth areas are in the labour market that you can then, from government to policy to delivery on the provider side, you start to create those opportunities for young people to enrol onto these types of programs. Now, if we do more of that and more intelligence around market analysis, looking at the labour market and growth, we can start to develop more opportunities to bring people in to get the skills they need for the job market.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the key points for us is the driver for us is the policy side,
Yeah.
because the government are the ones who also dictate the way the curriculum, qualifications and various other things are developed and delivered, we as a provider in the college, we have to adapt our ways of working in order to meet those needs. And I think importantly with employers as well, the employers are our partners. We just need them to tell us what they need in their job market, their workplace, so that we can again adapt our delivery of training and various other things to meet the needs of the employer. And then we can start to bring people in to go and do work experience and develop skills for work so that they're more employable when they get to that point.
Absolutely, you're completely right about developing the curricula that is actually tailored to the market need, and actually looking at it's like any business. You set up a business because you've discovered or identified a need in the market. And it's like one of my business gurus. I can't remember his name now, but he talked about when you're thinking about a business, he talked about finding a hungry market. So we know the hungry market. So I think the government or previous government identified 8 driving sectors. The advanced manufacturing, the clean industries, creative industries, digital and technology, professional business services, life sciences, and so on and so on, right? So it's about tailoring. And actually one of the things that came out from the Milburn Review report in May was that one of the ways we're going to solve this is through local level.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the new government, the new prime minister, is talking about devolution of power, where you devolve power to the communities.
Yeah.
And the other, and it's interesting. I mean, so it is going to be that joined up approach. You're right about that, and I believe that is definitely the way forward, and it's how we start to really tackle this problem.
Yeah.
Where we have a joined up approach, and also because I mentioned it earlier in the last episode or the last segment about how because things are moving so fast. It needs to be joined up. It needs to be, both local and regional, maybe national as well, right? So because things are moving so rapid.
Yeah.
And so, a final question, really, Janet.
Can I just point slightly back to the NEET, because you
Sure.
kept quoting that as well, and I think that's the core. Is if we're looking at local and regional policy development or working together with the community, I think if we all know in our individual areas what NEET numbers then that we've got, how the local authorities or boroughs are dealing with that, so they draw in the community, wider community, so that we can enable our young people then to get the right engagement at the right time before they then become NEET. Like, for example, as I said, when they start to think about leaving school, because many years ago you used to have like what was known called connections. So you'd know which learners are now actually, or young people, are going to come off roll from school and where their direction of travel was. If that information is not known amongst the whole wider community, it's difficult for us all to collaborate, to work together. So I think importantly, it's good to be able to know in our own areas what numbers we're dealing with and how we report back to the local authority.
No, absolutely. That's right. And that's about accountability.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things that I've heard the government, I've read somewhere, is that the government is, or DFE in particular, Department for Education, is actually looking at placing some of that accountability with local authorities, because ultimately these NEETs will eventually become their clients that they have to support through various programs, whether it's Connect to Work, which is a DWP program, whether it's the youth guarantee schemes and all of that kind of stuff, right? So the local authorities are going to be accountable, and I think that's where the DFE is going with this. So just maybe my last question, Janet, and we can't, have a show with, you in the room with all your knowledge and wisdom. So the advice is the question is, what advice would you give to a young person or student unsure about their future and trying to work out what their next step will be?
Well, if I go back to the time when they're starting to do their GCSEs, I think that's the most crucial point in their time as well. Because once they choose their GCSEs or their subjects, that's the direction they're travelling. And I think importantly for us anyway, as adults and educators, or if it's a parent carer, it's giving the right guidance at that point when they're at that age, before they start to make sure they choose their options, because then they're now looking at their future goals, destinations. So by year 11, it's then when they're starting to narrow down, do their GCSEs. When they get to year 12, that's when they start to look at doing their A-levels and various things, and then year 13 is when they start doing their UCAS. So I think from year 10 and stuff, we've got to make sure the young people are getting the right guidance, the right choices, and people are offering them the right experiences to go out in the world to taste things, see if I like doing this type of work. Is it going to help me to develop something in the future? Even equipping our young people to look ahead in the future rather than looking just say tomorrow, look at longer term. Give them the tools to be able to do that, vision what it would look like. And I think that helps them to make proper choices when they then go to think about from age 16 onwards, I'm going to choose this course. Because I've come across so many young people, when they come to college, for example, either their parents have directed them to do a particular course, they come and start and they end up not wanting to engage because it's not what they wanted to do. Then you may get some who come and they decide I want to change direction and stuff, which is fair enough, give them the options. But I think most importantly is giving them the right insights from when they're younger. My advice would be to make sure that we do that, you know, give our young people the chance to think about where they want to be and how they're going to get there. It's not just about money. It's about getting a good skills agenda for yourself, for your career, for the future. I think, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to sort of round off that, and you might want to just come back quickly on this. One of the I read this really good quote on this topic, and something that I'm seeing a lot more in HE is that, and I always wonder when I first came into HE. I should probably be very careful what I say here, but when I first came into HE. You know, and I think this is not just an HE thing. This is probably across the board, starting from, like you said, primary, secondary level, particularly at secondary level and above. Is careers should not just be owned by one department. It shouldn't be just the responsibility of one team. It should be an institutional thing. So it's not just an additional thing. It's not just something that you bolt on to the services or to your curriculum. It should be strategic.
Yeah.
So when we talk about strategic plans, it should be front and center.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, why are we there?
Yeah.
Why are we there? We're there to see the success, and we have this thing in HE. We talk about continuation, progression, and completion. You know, it's ultimately about the success of that student, that young person. So it should. So why it was ever just the sole responsibility of one team, I just don't understand that. You know, it should but it's really good to see that now that tune is changing, and we're now singing from, or there's this belief now that it should be strategic, it should be holistic, it should be institutionally wide across the board, it should be front and center, first line on the agenda when you have those executive board meetings. You know, you've been in those sort of meetings, I've been in some of those meetings working in my voluntary capacity. You know, it should be front and center. It should be what you talk about ultimately. I mean, yes, there's other factors, finance, governance and all that kind of stuff that we have to deal with, and compliance, but it's ultimately about making sure that careers and employability is front and center of your strategic plan.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as you mentioned earlier as well, in terms of everyone's responsibility, from when a young person starts school, as you say, we're all there to see them through that end journey, however many years are in that environment. But I think we have to ensure that our teachers, providers have all got the training, the necessary insights and skills to be able to teach careers, employability from a very beginning, early start. And if and when, like where I am at college, when we do enrolment, at interview with young people, all of our staff need to have information, advice and guidance, knowledge of some sort to be able to direct that young person as they're going to make their choice for their career. And so as they start, then everyone's involved in planning, projects, various other things, as you say, whether it's in delivering the subject, specialism, whether it's just general stuff to do with skills development. But you're right, everyone needs to be able to have the tools to be able to feel confident to deliver that agenda.
Absolutely. I want to say thank you so much to Janet. And I mean, are there any just last, I mean, in terms of in terms of what you're just maybe focused on right now going forward? I mean, I know you're really heavily in governance and compliance and volunteering. I mean, just tell us a little bit, just to round off, what your focus is over the next year or so is going to be on.
Well, my focus at the moment, because of the fact with all my experiences, I would like to be able to teach and develop young people, like mainly young girls, women, in terms of doing some things around leadership, coaching, and just giving the options to make choices for themselves and reflect on where they are and where they want to be. And sometimes when you get to be on a journey, whether it's your career or something else, you decide to reflect and look and see what you've gained as value. Like what was said earlier with one of the guests you had, was to reflect on where you are and where you want to be. And then just, I want to be able to use whatever knowledge and experiences to give back out to the wider community as well.
Fantastic. And I know you're doing that. I mean, for our guests, for our listeners, if you're interested in getting advice about careers, you want some coaching, you're a young person, a young woman, especially Janet Davidson, look her up. She's on LinkedIn. I hope you don't mind me
No,
plugging
I don't
that.
mind that.
You know, so do connect with her. I've known her for many years. I was actually employed by her as well. I'm not ashamed to say that. She's an amazing person. So I just want to say thank you so much, Janet, for your time. I'm really delighted. It was kind of like last minute as well, asking
Yeah.
you to come on the Confident Career Show to share some of your knowledge and your incredible knowledge and insight in what's going on out there in the education and employability career space. So thank you so much. I also want to thank, just lastly, Joe and Des, our technical people here at this studio. Until the next episode of the Confident Career Show, I just want to wish everyone a lovely summer. Enjoy your summer, whatever you get up to, and keep believing. Yeah. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.